Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of VCTV. I'm Collicott, your host, and we are here in Q3, the beginning of September, the last month as we head into that almost last quarter of the year. This is very important. We've talked about this every episode on VCTV. This past week is quarter three, third quarter, Q3, however you want to define it, is an important time for both entrepreneurs and investors. It's when a ton of investment activity happens. It also happens to be when a lot of innovation and a lot of announcements and a lot of changes happen very, very quickly. And in the month of September is no lacquer. This month has probably some of the biggest activity, if not next to October, the most activity in the given year when it comes to fundraising, announcements, and just general changes and activities around technology and industries. So we're unpacking that every single day, multiple times a day, double episodes here on VCTV every single day to make sure you have the latest when it comes to technology, industries, and regions around the world so you're up to date. All right? Investors, for those that are tuning in, if you'd like to be on a show like today with Elena and I, we'd love to have you. Do reach out. We've got plenty of topics. We'd love to find the right one for you to share your thoughts and insights like our investors will do here shortly. And entrepreneurs, this is not just a stage for investors, this is also a stage for you. As I mentioned, this is a hot time to raise capital. This is a very important month and quarter for you. There is a virtual stage here for you to pitch us as investors and pitch our entire live audience. Interested? Reach out. The entire LATOKEN team, Elena and or myself would be happy to help you. Also, a big, big thank you to Elena and to the entire LATOKEN team for always making VCTV possible every single day, multiple times a day, especially in Q3, and on your devices anywhere in the world. With that, I'm Kyle Lacott, your host. Let's get into today's topic. It's all focused around energy and sustainability. We've got massive changes, huge technology integrations, big announcements that have happened throughout the industry and the landscape around energy. But sustainability, there's a lot that we've talked, just tip of the iceberg in that category. Tons more to talk about, and that's why we have our investors here today to share their thoughts and insights of what's happening throughout both these industries. Let's get started. With that, Ifran, welcome back, friend, for another episode. We're happy to have you back. Little intro and a little background, please.
Thank you, Kyle, and thank you, everyone, for having us in this panel. My name is Irfan. I'm the managing director of Irfan Holdings, but I'm also part of the portfolio of NDB, which is a new energy company announcement that we have made very recently. So energy and sustainability has been one of the core area of our focus for some time, and my personal focus, both through investment as well as developing around the technology. On the background that you're seeing here, it is the laboratory from the Cavendish Laboratory at the University of Cambridge, where some of our work has been going on some groundbreaking energy component that we are working on, as well as tackling sustainability. So I'll take a deep dive, if you want me to, around that. But that said, happy to be here and looking to add value. Thank you.
Wonderful. And also for those who may be tuning in for the first time, Ifran and I did an awesome talk together, and it was really all Efren. He put on a great keynote about what was happening overall in the energy industry. So definitely check that out here on VCTV for a little recap as well. We did earlier in the summer. But moving on, first time guest here with Elena and I on VCTV, Catherine. I see you're in orbit, but if you could just come down to ground just to join us for a few, but a little intro, a little background.
Yeah, thanks. Definitely interesting backgrounds that people have been using throughout the Zoom interaction. But thanks for having me. Very excited to be here. So I have been managing Carbon Ventures, which is a seed stage fund focused on technologies that reduce carbon emissions. I am now actually launching a new vehicle focused on sustainability in energy space, agriculture, water, and carbon reductions. So very exciting time. The name of it to be disclosed at a later day. But this is the first time I'm talking about this, so very excited. I spent my entire career as an investor, first managing AIG's insurance money, investing in hedge funds, then helping Merrill build its private equity and hedge fund platforms and technology that run such platforms. And I spent a few years at a family office investing in real estate and also deploying eco-friendly technologies there. And now I'm in venture. So the most exciting space I've been in so far and focused completely on sustainability.
That's super exciting. And real quick, I know you can't talk about the new fund, so I'm not going to push you for all the good info around that. But do have a quick question around carbon. For those who may not be familiar, can you tell us a little bit more about it? Maybe where you focus, kind of your average investment, what you look for in a company, those types of things?
Yeah, absolutely. So carbon was focused on super early technologies. So pre-seed, seed stage, mainly post MVP, but pre-revenue. And all technologies that are in industrial B2B space. So sorry, no consumer tech, but definitely technologies that are helpful in the real world and things that move our world and help us transition to sustainability. With a new fund, it will be more Series A and B. So a bit more grown-ups and technologies that are ready to scale, but also post MVP and post revenue this time.
Awesome. Well, for those tuning in, if you're looking for a great investor in this space, stay tuned. All right. Thank you, Catherine. Enos, welcome back as well. It's a pleasure to see you again. If you can, a little intro, a little background for those that are tuning in.
Sure. Thank you, Kyle. I'm based in Amman, Jordan. I manage the Catalyst MENA Clean Energy Fund. So Middle East, North Africa centric renewable energy efficiency investor. Previously, we managed a venture capital fund in energy and water technology. Again, Middle East, North Africa. And original background, grew up in the US, entrepreneur in the IT space in the US, and also worked with Ford Motor Company for a number of years.
Very nice. All right. Well, welcome back to the show. Last but not least, another new guest as well here with Elena and I on VCTV. Gregor, welcome to the show. Pleasure to have you. A little intro and a little background as well.
Thank you, Kyle, Elena. Yeah, so I'm a principal investor, green finance guy, previously the MD of a thing called the UK Green Investment Bank. I also ran a CEO, a asset management firm in South Africa, which in fact did the first listing of any carbon instrument anywhere in the world before even the EU ETS was trading, and that was in the mid-2000s. And I now run an advisory firm which advises governments and development banks on structuring of new funds. So we've just helped the European Commission launch the Innovation Fund. This is this 1 billion a year fund to fund new energy technology projects across the European Union. We're busy with some sovereign green bond issuances with Southeast Asian, Middle Eastern, and European sovereigns. And I do work on particular transactions in the emerging markets. So I sit on a number of investment committees, the CSEF facility in Singapore, which focuses on Southeast Asia, the Emergence funds in South Africa, which focus on Africa, and the UNCDF investment committees, which is the only UN agency that does loans into the financial inclusion and energy sector. And enough from me for the moment.
Wow, I felt like you had at least 2 more things to add, but that's a huge resume. This is great. Guys, this is an awesome panel. I'm excited to have each of you here joining Elena and the LATOKEN team and myself. This is going to be a ton of fun. So let's get started. As we all mentioned in some way, shape, or form, there's a lot happening in this space. There's a lot to talk about. So I'm going to start with the easy question for everybody, and that's, what do you see as the current state around energy and sustainability? Would love to hear your views as what you're seeing happening in these areas as well. And so Irfan, we're going to start with you, and then we'll come around to everybody.
Great, thanks, Kyle. So for starters, this has been a great week for the energy industry. I'm sure everybody is aware about some of the announcements that's been happening all across the industry. That being said, one of the major challenges that I have seen throughout the energy industry and the sustainability component around the energy industry is, what is the future? What is going to be the security, energy security for our future? So obviously, on the scientific terms, we have been trying to approach things in various capacity, trying to improve what we have, trying to work around, negate some of the problems that are coming from the existing energy industry. On top of that, there are people who are working on or trying to tackle this challenge from a completely different perspective, right? So as for myself and our team, we've been looking into how to tackle the energy industry, how to create energy security from a completely different resource. So as I'm speaking right now, and I can also speak a little bit as to what we're looking at, is trying to look at create a sustainability where we have large amount of nuclear energy across the world, and trying to create manage this waste from the nuclear energy to resolve an energy problem that we are trying to resolve. So what we are working on is a nuclear voltaic battery, essentially, and our goal is to eventually be able to power most of the things across the world with this kind of energy resources. But I'll keep that separate. But just in general, this industry is ready to boom, and the competition is high. There are new groundbreaking technology in different spheres that are happening, whether in the nuclear space, whether it's on the other alternative energy space, or in the efficiency space. But we are now pushing the boundaries of science as well as the limitations that we have come across, and trying to tackle the problem, because we know that the problems around the industry, we have to tackle this now, not later. Thank you.
You're absolutely right. I mean, this is, if any time, there's no other time than the present. I mean, right now, when it comes to energy, and having seen many companies in the space as well in different areas, there's so much advancement as we're talking about, but this is the time. And Catherine, I want to come to you next to follow that point of Ifran's. I mean, what are you seeing as the current state of these areas from your view?
Yeah, well, the current state is there is a huge investment gap in the energy space. So it's I've seen somewhere that it's estimated to be about 90 trillion over the next 20 years. 90 trillion that we're missing in the infrastructure in general, and about 25 of that is in energy. So that's something to be to be built over the next 20 years. And I think our transition to renewables is definitely the future. So integrating renewables into microgrid, running traditional infrastructure with IoT and digitalization of the assets as well. So pretty much every traditional asset that's running now, every factory, every energy producer is upgrading and creating new sustainable ways of doing this. So it's a huge transformation that's going on in the space, and it's great to be at the forefront of it and being able to see technologies that are literally changing the way we use energy, the way we manage energy. There's so much progress in the energy storage, energy generation. So if you split the energy sector, right, into kind of different categories, right? So there is energy generation, that's where everything starts, right? The distribution, that's the power microgrid, etc. Then optimization and how we run our buildings. So building management and industrial IoT that's already starting to run some of the buildings out there, but that's going to come down to every building out there with the new regulations. And finally, energy storage as kind of the fourth subsector. It's changing the world, but not fast enough. And obviously still a lot of investment dollars that are missing from the sector. And that's exactly the gap that we're trying to fulfill, and people like us.
I love it. I've got a follow-up question, but we're going to hold on it for just a few more minutes, and we're going to come back to it. So Enos, I want to come to you. Current state. I mean, you're coming from the MENA region right now where you focus a lot, but generally, what are you seeing happening around these two areas? Oh, you're on mute.
Thanks, Kyle. Sorry about that. So certainly the awareness around climate was exacerbated with COVID. As we know, the EU's focus and EIB's focus, European Investment Bank's focus on being the climate bank and then being the powerhouse for new energy technologies also another wave that's driving sustainable energy forward. With that, we see two specific things as opportunities. One, we are in a much lower interest rate environment, and all of a sudden, capex intensive projects are a lot more feasible, which really means renewable energy projects, because you're making your investment upfront. So solar, wind, a portion of the 20-year cost of these projects is interest. And when interest rates are down, all of a sudden these projects are a lot more commercially viable and attractive than they were before. So that's one, and that's something, the cost of a swap to fix interest rates in emerging markets, in our region at least, has come down from 2.5% to 0.8%. So almost a 70% drop, a third. And that's about a third of the cost of interest on a loan. So it's significant. The second, which is what we saw in the telecom sector, when you went from fixed to wireless and could be decentralized, well, we're seeing that now with the decreasing cost of storage. Now that you have the spike in electric vehicles, the announcements about volumes, all of a sudden, what we're calling baseload solar or baseload wind, baseload meaning round the clock, 24/7, is viable 80% of the time. And what that means is that with the whole kind of post-COVID need for greater independence, because you don't want if your neighbor goes down, you don't want to go down. There is an increasing trend towards getting to 80-90% renewables. That's now feasible with solar and wind, where before that was only feasible with maybe hydro, with geothermal. So places like our region, southern US, the desert zone, the Sahara, etc., can now become 80% renewable energy driven on solar and wind. This is going to take 10 to 20 years, but it's become feasible now.
Wow. I'm sitting here shaking my head, like just excited about the opportunity and the possibility of that in general. Gregor, I want to come to you next. Same thing, current state. What are you seeing currently around both energy and sustainability? What's happening, what's not happening, et cetera?
So I'll talk about the two sides. Unfortunately, I don't do as exciting work as Irfan on new technology. But what I do see is which technologies are growing, which new ones. And there's some technologies which can scale very, very quickly. One of them is offshore wind. So you'll see that someone can put a megawatt of power onto the grid in a single project with these enormous turbines. And you've no idea the size of them until you actually see them. I mean, a modern turbine will be 2.5 football pitches laid down next to each other and then risen up, plus blades, which are, each are bigger than the wingspan of a jumbo 380. These are absolutely enormous pieces of kit. So you're seeing, because of the scale and because of the development of the technology, suddenly you can get scale renewables onto the grid. What that means is that you can procure very, very quickly and that the costs come down. So even in these more edgy technologies like offshore wind, they're suddenly beating coal, they're beating traditional fossil fuel investments. The difficulty then you've got is managing a bigger and bigger amount of intermittent generation on the grid, stuff that doesn't have a flat profile of generation. So what you need then is what Catherine was talking about, what Ines was talking about, is storage. You have the ability to store that energy and use it when the energy has not been generated through the solar or the wind resource. So storage has become increasingly important. But the big news really is the huge cost reduction in both the technology of the generation plus the technology of the storage suddenly allows you to combine the two so that you can combine them and together still be cheaper than generation. The other thing that's happening on the financing side is that through regulation, people are becoming more comfortable with sustainable investment because they know what it is. They can define it now. They have a taxonomy, but also you're doing it in a low interest rate environment. And people are looking for infrastructure investments, which is where you've got base rates at 0%, and you've got an infrastructure investment, which over time has a really low default rate. You can invest that, you can get a yield, and you can get a better investment by investing in a portfolio of infrastructure projects, which is relatively low risk, but get a higher interest rate in a low interest rate environment. And that's what's invited institutions like pension funds, like the insurance companies, to start investing and well, not start investing, they've been doing it for a while, but start investing in the more risky portions of these investments.
Which is a great point and kind of leads me into my next question before I get to a few follow-ups. And now, I mean, as we look at this, where the current state is, how do underlying technologies or digitization, to Catherine's point, start to play a role? Because we look at, and Efrain's talked about this, so other guests as well, around, you know, the idea of blockchain to artificial intelligence, machine learning, all of these different technologies, deep technologies, so infrastructure technologies are playing a role in the redefining of this new infrastructure that we're planning for. So we'd love to hear kind of your views as to where those intersect and what possibilities that can come from. And I'll let you pick out the infrastructure technology that works best. But Efrain, I'll start with you. I mean, where do you see technology like deep tech integrating into energy and sustainability?
Yeah, so I think for starters, you know, there's a lot of points over there. So if we're talking about, you know, the future of the infrastructure that we're going to need, we're going to look into the problems that we have right now and some of the problems that we're going to come across over the decades and the centuries and millennia to come. So that being said, you know, to stay focused, you know, energy security is very important, number one. Two is that Catherine mentioned, you know, optimization, storage, you know, these are components that are directly relevant to that, right? So optimization, you know, output level. So because energy determines, you know, what kind of things that we're going to end up getting. At the same time, we're talking about management, right? So we're talking about sustainability management, how we're going to manage it. And that directly relates to some of the way that, you know, we deploy systems technology, right? And then when we go to the core of the technology, that is right now on a vertical scale, right? So we are at the cusp of things, right? So I mean, recently you must have already seen, you know, Neuralink made the announcement. So these are frontier tech that's gonna push our society and our civilization. But that being said, you know, in order for all those things to happen, various technology needs to integrate. Think about quantum computing. I mean, this is people have been, you know, researching around that field for some time. Of course, you know, there are challenges for it to come to reality. And even, you know, think of a world where you might have quantum computers as a personal computer, right? Because as of right now, energy plays a big part into the cost structure of a quantum computer. And then quantum computers functionality comes down very much on a very B2B enterprise level. It's kind of like if you go back in the 60s, what the regular computers were looking like, right? So you would call an iPhone that you have right now a supercomputer that was used by NASA back in the days, right? And even then, that was not as competent as this. So transistors, you know, are becoming different. So advances in semiconductors, etc. So bottom line is that we are growing as a civilization, both in population. We are having challenges. We have scarce resources, and we need to know how to manage them. We need to know how we can get better, you know, output from less, and also how we can manage. So I'll keep my conversation up to that, and then, you know, we can move to the next stages. Thanks.
I mean, it was perfect. It was just enough of a conversation starter for everybody. Catherine, to you, same thing. I mean, you mentioned IoT, you mentioned microgrids. These are things that we've talked about and seen in the industry for microgrids, you know, the past decades. But realistically, we've been teased about it, I would say probably the past decade when it comes to the Internet of Things, right? IoT, the Internet of Things, has been talked about around energy for a long time. I'll just leave it at that. There's been a lot of empty promises in that sector. And so we'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Where does technology in these industries cross?
Yeah, well, I'll definitely, I'll argue with you about the empty promises because I do work with tech companies and they are amazing. And they are actually a lot of technologies that are running energy space, traditional and renewable as well. It's just not something that you hear about every day. It's not a sexy topic that has IPO'd. A lot of exits in the sector, you don't see them in the public eye. It's all B2B businesses, and usually the people who know about these technologies are very, very highly trained specialists within the energy companies, within the grid companies, right? So it's a very close circle of people who get introduced to them, but they do exist. And IoT has changed dramatically over the past 5-10 years. In the past, you did have to build everything from scratch, layer by layer, protocol by protocol, right? It's still relatively difficult to embed things on a device level, but once you get through that layer, there are so many analytics companies that can pick up the numbers and help optimize the systems. But it's those that actually go and build the protocols on top of devices that make the difference. So there are different types of IoTs, right? So there are ones that have an end-to-end application. So they build the hardware, they build the software, and they charge for the hardware-software model. And there are ones that just do a component of that. There are more and more variations of this. And once that's built on certain devices, let's say they've built certain protocols on grid devices, very similar techniques can be applied then to oil well operation and to waste and water management. So more and more of these technologies emerge, and they are starting to compete with each other. So now you have to not just select an IoT company, but also select the one that is the most applicable. I mean, think about the innovations in the computer space that happened as well. It's so now we have quantum, right? So someone mentioned cybersecurity. Yeah, it's a huge problem. So how to build unbreakable security, right? And quantum, I think, in the next 5-10 years is going to be responsible for that. So and not just it will move from academia to the real world, right? And will protect our servers, etc. But even before we get to that, how to build technologies that are protective of our infrastructure? Because think about it, we're talking about water, we're talking about electricity. If it's hacked, if it's bugged, then it's a huge problem. So that's why there are a lot of tests that go into this before it's even deployed. So you start with like almost a year-long pilot test, just with a few devices, and then move on to the rest of it. So it's very, very interesting shift that's happening, and it's easier to build things one system on top of another now that there are many systems that can be combined. Imagine what a website looked like a long time ago. You really had to be a coder to build a website. Now you can just go to Wix and build a website in 5 minutes because someone has built that system for you, right, in order to make it simpler. Same things are happening now in the industrial tech, and more applications of the kind of operating systems that are popping up in the infrastructure space that will be popping up and solving problems that are more on the optimization level versus the device level. But things are happening, and I can name you a few good firms that are actually the market leaders in the sectors.
I'm with you. Having been in the IoT space and laying bets in this as well, I'm with you. But you bring up a good point, is that a lot of these companies are infrastructure. A lot of them do sit on the B2B side, so they're not talked about as prominently, which is okay, right? That's an okay thing for companies because they are building something at the infrastructural level, and those are longer cycles. Those are more intensive in terms of what they do. But one thing I do want to bring back to light is security. So we talk about energy and just general sustainability. Security is a very big issue. We talked a little bit about this on yesterday's show around edge and IoT and really the Internet of Everything, including ourselves and the devices that we use. As we have more sensors and then more devices that are connected and those that were not connected that become connected, how do we look at security? Because if you all of a sudden go from 10 devices to 10 million to 100 million to billions of devices, when it comes to these basic needs, to your point of energy, water, etc., security is a very big issue. Where are we with it when it comes to security? How is security being thought about? And Catherine, I'll start with you, Efrain. I'm going to come back to you, and then Ines, I'm going to come down to you as well, and Gregor. So.
Yeah. So security can sit on the cloud level, but in order to offer the best protection, it should sit on a device level, right? So then think about hacking every single device that's out there. That's very difficult to do. Hacking a cloud, that's just one big thing that you need to have. So I think that's the biggest differentiator, and the thing that I definitely look for in the firms is whether they have that special layer of protocols sitting on the device level, which is, I think, critical for the infrastructure sector specifically.
And I would agree. I've seen even just device-to-device communication, right? So leveraging blockchain, which I'm kind of taking from a friend who'll comment a little further, but using blockchain as a interconnected layer there, specifically around smart contracts. So point A to point B can or cannot talk, and can and cannot share certain types of data. But Ifran, anything else to add around security?
Right. No, first of all, I really appreciate the point that Catherine brought about. It's a very important aspect of it. So prior to that, also, just in a nutshell, now, where we are in terms of, so IoT, I mean, obviously, is a term that we are using. Obviously, it's been there for some time as telemetry, right? So what we're trying to do is that right now there's a shift towards thinking from the original process, which is what Catherine is talking about, which is more device-based as opposed to, more like a entire network-based. Because when you're talking about security hazard and security, you have to tackle it from a proactive approach versus, reactive approach, right? So, and when you are in a reactive approach, and when it's happening in the reactive approach, it's your entire system, when you're interconnected, is vulnerable to situations like that. So IoT heavily depends on something what we know as mesh network system, right? So mesh network system itself could be a challenging place to be. Obviously, it is working right now, but the more gates you have, the more options you are creating for people to break in. So one of the things that we're looking at, even through our technology breakthrough, is to how we can reshift back into IoT management in more what you already had before, which is more like how single IoT or machine interfaces can perform both operations as well as taking information. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that if they are able to do a higher computation within the system under a certain cost, and the limitation was, of course, in our side, what we knew is that the limitation was energy also was a part into that, because you cannot have a firmware operating device, that is small enough, that is cost effective enough, that's going to function in a standalone level, right? Rather than going through the entire network system, which is cumbersome, but also redundant. Newer sensors and IoTs, and some of the major players, big fives that I can talk about, at least not by naming them, with whom we are also having discussions, is that their focus is also towards the IoT. As we are moving towards autonomous vehicle, as we are moving towards more efficient home management, as we are moving towards more efficient agro management, machine management, supply chain management. And then again, this is where also blockchain comes into play, right? So blockchain, as we know, has certain properties that helps in these kind of system. One is that immutability, provenance, as well as tracking, etc. So it's a combination of things, and we've spoken about this before also. So moving towards singularity to an extent. But I'll leave that topic for now. But in general, obviously, this is a great place, and we are going to see some major shift also, and trying to bring back some of the older systems and technology and integrate them with the modern ones also in order to move ahead.
Well, we mentioned Industry 4.0. I mean, we had a show here on VCTV last week around Industrial 4.0 and IIoT, and the advancements that we've seen around the digitization, integrating automation, and really applying some of these again, deep technologies towards where those have advanced, and have advanced so rapidly in the last 12 months. I think that's what most of us tend to forget, is how fast things have moved. And back to Catherine's point, you don't hear about a lot of this stuff because it is B2B, it is infrastructure, so it's not top of mind for many people, but there has been a lot of advancements in these areas over the past 12 months. Gregor, I want to come to you. You are working with governments and the like through your advisory efforts around these types of projects. Any further comments around security or deep technologies, and anything you want to add there? I apologize.
Yeah, I think when you look at the sustainability market, power generation and anything that produces emissions is a target of investment for a sustainability investment fund. So when you look at what the effect of tech is on sustainability, you've got to look at what is the effect of tech on those industries which produce the most emissions. So big emitting industries, steel, so forth, mobility, transport emissions are a big part. They over 30% of the emissions in Europe, for example. And then you look at power generation, which again, historically has been in very high emitting market. And you say, looking at where technology is going, what is common? And you've got to look for what is the point of convergence. So I'll take a good example. Look at e-mobility and you say, okay, who are the winners in e-mobility right now? Clearly, there's a brand out there that's very, very highly valued by the market. But why is it highly valued by the market? Because it produces cars, because it produces batteries. Is it a software company? Does it produce rooftop generation? It does all of those. But what does it do? In a single brand, it focuses on the points of convergence. So what are the points of convergence across many technology sectors? The one is production of batteries, using electricity as a fuel, using a common technology for that source of fuel or for the source of power, and using a common software understanding and structure to implement that technology. So what is going to be common and what are going to be the winning solutions if you look 20, 30 years into the future? Those are going to be solutions which converge a single technology platform or single types of technology across different industries. So where you're going to have the emissions reduction, largely in the next 10 to 20 years, you're going to see a huge increase of battery technology in the forms of storage of power and recharging and discharging of power on the electricity system. That is going to be matched by a move from ICE vehicles to the electrification of transport. And it's going to happen at multiple levels, right down from scooters to vehicles to public transport. And you're going to have electrification of previously fossil fuel industries because they're converging around single technologies, and they're converging around single technologies which are done at scale, and therefore the costs are reducing. So you're seeing electric arc furnaces, for example, in the steel manufacturing industry, they're starting to become cost competitive. You'll see more and more of that and more of that technology. So when I work with governments and development banks on funding of these structures, you look at how are you going to promote funding of convergence technologies which are going to have a benefit for society as a whole because they're applicable across multiple industries.
I couldn't agree more on around battery technologies as well. I mean, we've talked a little bit about this on previous episodes. It's a stat that I'm still baffled by. And, we look at China, for instance, and what happened in the city of Shenzhen, right? They had a mandate in Southeast China, and specifically in the area of Shenzhen, to convert all buses, public buses in the city in 2 years from gas powered to electric. And they were able to do that in, I think, just over a year, almost 17,000 buses, that conversion. And to your point, Gregor, I mean, this is stuff that's happening on a pretty massive scale very quickly as well. And some of the other points that have been mentioned throughout today is the costs have come down. The technology integration is faster, easier than it was before as well. And Ines, I want to come to you as well. The same question around security and around these technology integrations. Anything else to add of what you're seeing around security and then again, technology integration? Oh, you're on mute.
I'll talk to technology, thank you, since security is well addressed by my co-panelists. And I would say there are two angles to the technology side. One, as a add-on to what Catherine mentioned, there's the value chain from power generation to distribution to consumption at the factories and the buildings. Connecting all of this together, intelligence across all of this so that you can better match supply and demand, analytics, artificial intelligence. I told our, we have an entrepreneurial member on our operations and maintenance team for our solar project, and he wants to get into AI and have a startup. I told him, we'll do a startup in our field. What is that? That is you're operating and maintaining our solar plants. Well, it would be great if we can look at the forecast of weather so we can predict our future performance of the solar plant next day, next week, next month, and therefore better time, let's say, our cleaning cycles and our maintenance cycles, for example. Artificial intelligence and predictive maintenance for parts, potential breakdown of facilities. So you can take any one of those pieces, let's say generation, distribution, demand, the facilities, and have intelligence there and analytics. But ultimately, to Greg's point, well, you want something across all of this. So now, Kyle, in your house, you can be told that, look, if you want to turn on your washing machine now for the next 3 hours, or there's intelligence in your washing machine that receives information that basically, if you do the cycle now, it's going to cost you 30% less your power, because it's connected to the distribution network and to the power network. And all of a sudden you're matching supply and demand, you're affecting behavior by changing pricing real time, and you're optimizing this whole system. So this is the layer of software and analytics and AI. And I think there's a lot to be done, and it's deep. The other point of deep tech for me is the more hardware level. And that's to Greg's point on storage technology, right? We have different forms of storage technology emerging. We're going to have, so far, only incremental improvements in wind and solar, but there will be leaps in wind and solar, in inverter technology, and in battery technology. These take more time because of the nature of our industry. Whatever is done through hardware takes a lot more time to prove the resilience of it and the bankability of it. And Greg knows this. We're raising debt for 15 years. We're signing 25-year agreements with governments. So whatever technology we're adding to the mix has to be proven. So the cycle time, unfortunately, as again, Catherine said, is a bit longer. So eventually, Irfan's new technologies will come through, but they take time if they're on the hardware level, let's say. But on the analytics side, I think that's where you can have a faster cycle time.
Absolutely. I mean, hardware's hard. It's a long cycle. Gregory, go ahead.
One more thing I wanted to say is convergence is not necessarily just convergence around a single technology across all industry. It might be convergence around a preferred technology. So in the wind turbine industry, for example, you've seen the same turbine design replicated many, many times. Now, some other industries don't lend themselves to it because the conditions are different. Wave and tidal don't, because the wave type of energy is different all over the world, and there probably won't be convergence over those technologies. So you're probably not going to have the reduction. But it also goes to regulation. Basically, what will happen, the market is relatively efficient. People will tend towards the most reliable and the least cost alternative. But if the market doesn't allow that, if regulation in a country, which we have in some emerging markets, says that we don't have cost reflective tariffs for our technology. In other words, we're only going to charge our consumers 5 US cents per kilowatt hour when the actual cost in our country is 15 cents, because there are the political reasons we want to do that. That doesn't help you. You've got to have an efficient market to meet the most efficient exposition of that technology. And in order to do that, you need political will, but you also need to have sufficient technology available in that country to do that. So in some cases, you don't have a very sophisticated grid. You don't have a grid management system. So there's a lot of work sometimes to meet convergence. There's regulatory work, there's political will, and there's technology which needs to be implemented before you've got an environment where you can actually meet that requirement or threshold of convergence.
Catherine, you had a point, and then I've got a big question for everybody, but go ahead.
Yeah, just to add to that, what you're talking about is consumer behavior, right? So are we globally becoming more responsible citizens by trying to use less electricity and trying to change our behavior? So some people, yes, they do think about this, and they've had the time during COVID to reflect on their lives and how they want to be more sustainable. I think the awareness level is definitely higher. But also, if you think about the private sector, it's driven by efficiency, right? So the suppliers of energy, the suppliers of water, I mean, they are driven by analytics, and a lot of them are trying to deploy technology to do preventative maintenance, right? And to optimize the efficiency of operations, which is both like cost savings on the OpEx level, and yes, sometimes it requires CapEx to invest initially, but a lot of them do have budgets for that, and it's definitely reflecting overall, and eventually the bottom line definitely shifts to more efficiency. But on the consumer level, there is a demand, right? People do want to know, how much energy am I spending on this, right? What can I do better? And technologies that are starting to show us our own behavior and how we can be more responsible are popping up. So there's a shift between just purely industrial play, but now industrial and consumer are starting to work together because of the demand from the people to have a more sustainable planet. And that's changing a lot of things.
Absolutely. And a big question to everybody as we come up to the lightning round. One more big question here is opportunity. So we've talked a lot about where things cross, where things don't, where things are moving and shaping, but I really want to get into the areas of opportunity, right? Those who are tuning in as investors, where should they be paying attention to? Those that are entrepreneurs, where should they be thinking about in terms of entering new markets or potential products and services that they should be focusing on? So for each of you, where are the areas of opportunity that you're seeing as investors in the market? Ifran, we'll start with you and we'll come around.
Thanks, Kyle. I'll pick up from what everyone has just mentioned. So one thing for starters, the industry is very opaque also, and which means that a lot of the innovation sometimes it takes time for it to come to fruition. Like Gregor mentioned, it's hardware we're talking about. But at the end of the day, the point is that we have to push towards, for me, it is always the frontier technologies, the high end spectrum that offers that opportunity. Right now, what we're working on is on the back of the Nobel Prize winning concept that happened in 2010. And we're trying to push that limit, because at the end of the day, as Ennis mentioned, right? So that we have scientific limitation of some of the existing technologies, right? Whether it's the fossil fuels, whether it's the alternative, I know on the other alternative side, there has been folks who are also working on technology trying to do nuclear fusion, and here in England. But for me, it is kind of like my taste and my vision is to go and push those scientific limits. It's going to take time. But at the end of the day, that's an area that I would be looking at, because that offers the potential that we need to be looking at. So that's my take. Thank you.
Catherine.
Yeah, so it's a good question. This industrial sector is so massive. There's so many applications that there is enough room for everyone to be building good, necessary technologies, right? So if people have an idea and they can find a niche and become a great specialist within that niche, you no longer have to build everything end to end. You can just occupy that niche and get a small market share in the vast market. So everything is changing. We will build more infrastructure in the next 15 years than we've ever built before. So a lot of money is going into this, a lot of energy from both investors and corporates are going into this. So I think that if you have something good and you have proven it, do come to me. It's industrial tech first before you go to anyone else. And if you build the infrastructure projects, I am definitely happy to look at that as well, because we do project finance as well when it comes to renewables. So it's a changing world, and the more of us are participants in this and are building things that are necessary, as opposed to just good to have, the better off everybody will be.
I love just the call out right there, Catherine. I mean, just taking it forward for everybody, not messing around. If you're looking for money and looking to talk to a great investor, Catherine's put it out there. Reach out to her. We'll get to that information here in just a minute. Gregor, sorry you have to follow that up, but that's to you next.
You don't have to come to me with your money, but I'd be happy if you did. So I'll give you two answers to this. It depends who you are. If you're a big institutional investor, there's still lots of opportunity in traditional technology. Power generation is going to be the largest investment sector, and the growing sector there is offshore wind, clearly. There is a burgeoning but small sector in floating solar, which is something people are going to be looking at. And then increasingly, people are going to be looking at floating offshore wind, which is the next real growth scale generation technology out there. And where the exciting technologies we're seeing, I sit on the panels for evaluating early stage investments in a thing called H2020, which is really early stage European tech investment ideas in the energy field. And some of the more exciting technologies here are literally technologies that service those growth generation markets. So it is, for example, drones for remote cleaning of offshore wind turbines or onshore wind turbines. It's new, cheaper, more robust platforms for offshore wind generation, or it is specific smart generation technologies. I do believe that the areas that are already heavily invested in, for example, battery technology, are probably overtraded at the moment, unless you're looking at a very, very new chemistry. And again, that's not a market that I'm that familiar with, so I wouldn't be able to comment on myself. I'll leave it there for the moment.
Enos, to you, areas of opportunity.
Thanks, Kyle. I would say the ones we're directly focused on, aggregating renewable assets, because as interest rates are low, yields are low, people are already starting to pay a premium. So we noticed with COVID, actually assets have gotten more expensive, not less expensive, because compared to interest rates, they're more valuable. So that's number one. Number two, clients that have a high energy tariff per kilowatt hour that are willing to sign up to a substitute. And this is where you bring in the base load solar or wind with large scale storage. And I think the first to begin building large scale storage references, like multi-100 megawatt hour references for round the clock solar wind power generation, that's kind of the next wave of energy. That's what's going to take us from renewables, solar wind being 20 to 85. So the first opportunities there will be critical as reference bases for a $100 billion global opportunity, we feel.
And guys, with that, thank you so much. We're at the lightning round. So what that means to our audience is we're at the top of the hour. I want to come to everyone for their closing thoughts, and also maybe one piece of advice to those that are listening, along with where everyone can find you online. So Ifran, we'll start with you again. Any closing thoughts that you may have, but also a piece of advice that are for those that are looking to get into the space for the first time. And then where can everyone find you online?
Great. Thanks, Kyle. And thank you, everyone, for a great panel. And thank you to the audience for tuning in. That being said, energy industry is heating up, and it's going to become very exciting over the next few years. So keep an eye, watch out for that. And if you are working with really frontier technology, feel free to reach out to me over LinkedIn is the easiest way. My work has always been, I've been dedicated in that space, and I'm going to be in that space. I'm here to stay, and I'm going to be there for a very long time. All right, but that's pretty much, but thank you.
There you go. Gregor, to you, closing thoughts, one piece of advice for those getting started, and then where can everyone find you online?
Yeah, so if you are an investor in the space, you probably know the space fairly well. If you're an institutional investor, there are lots of ways to get into the market. If you're unfamiliar with the renewable market, there are lots of funds which are well established, which serve institutional investors. If you're a retail investor and you want to take a little bit more risk, then I would suggest doing a little bit more research around which technologies you believe are backing. But I'd focus on services and technologies which are providing a service or a product to existing growth markets, as I said, offshore wind, floating solar, those sorts of things, or focused on grid services, which are, I believe, one of the more robust and very, very large markets. You can find me online at my name, Gregor Patterson Jones, no-.com. Feel free to reach out if you want to talk about the energy market, finance, anything like that. Happy to chat.
Wonderful. Enos, to you. Closing thoughts, advice, and where can everyone find you?
Don't give up. That's point number one. Point number two, look at markets where the wind is behind you. So in MENA, for example, renewables are less than 3% of the energy mix. And there's room to go 20% with the traditional, then 80 with the storage bit. So huge room for growth. Everything is needed. Find me on LinkedIn, ENNIS Remawi. Thank you.
Wonderful. And Catherine.
Yeah.
Close us out.
Well, I think just stole my closing remark. Don't give up. So especially if you're building brilliant technologies, don't give up. It's difficult. It's long sales cycles, and it's hard to find people who do understand it. So don't ever give up and continue on. And as we shift from traditional energy to renewables, as we upgrade our infrastructure, as we rebuild our world in a more sustainable way, and also ways to get off this rock at some point and go other places and see what's out there, these technologies will be useful. And as we transition from the SCADAs to silicon to quantum, things have been progressing rapidly, and technology is way ahead of the game of everyone else. So you can almost see the future through the technology eyes. If you see something that's in the emerging tech today, it means that everyone will be talking about it 10 years from now. But hopefully things will move faster, and especially for now, as we need to cool this planet, as we need to be more responsible citizens. So yeah, don't give up if you're building these type of tech, and if you're an investor in the sector, then I applaud you, and I'd love to work with you, both investors and entrepreneurs.
Thank you all very, very much. Audience, there you have it. You've got an update of what's happening in this space, and you've got some of the best and the brightest from around the world sharing it with you and ready to talk if you're interested. So to each of you as our panelists and investors today, thank you so much for giving your time and also your thoughts and insights as well. To your audience, thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you heard, click subscribe, give us a thumbs up. Do reach out with any feedback, questions. If you'd like to be on a show like today, we'd love to hear from you and find the right spot for you, entrepreneurs. This is also a show for you. We'd love to have you on the show, so do reach out. Also, a big thank you to Elena and to the entire LATOKEN team for making VCTV possible every single day to you. And as I mentioned today, thank you, Enos. As I mentioned, today is a double episode, as we have every day here on VCTV. So before we go, a big thank you again to all of our investors. You can find all of them 24/7, 365 online. Do reach out. And remember, add context when you reach out, as we talked about earlier this week around investing and fundraising on and through social media. So make sure you let them know you saw them here on VCTV. I'm Kyle Ellicott, your host. We'll be back here in just a little bit to continue the conversation of what's happening in technology, industries, and regions around the world. Thank you, everybody.